Hello everyone, this is Nickredace. Today we're going to be talking about the Tactical Combat mod. Tactical Combat mod is a mod based around enhancing the immersion and options given to a player in the tactical and strategic portions of XCOM 2. We try to do this by restricting available resources from the player, such as ammo, weapons, and other utility items, to allow other playstyles to stand out, while also giving the player a larger tech tree to work with, and giving the player new enemies or allies based on the interactions with the factions. To do this, the mod will be split into 3 separate sections. First being additional weapon tiers and balancing, with the reverse engineering portion. The second being the ammo restrictions, ammo types, building items, and item weights and balancing. Lastly is the faction module, which will include 3 factions, faction-specific items, and the relationship slide that will determine whether they appear in your missions as allies or enemies. Also, this is a mod concept. This means I'm just throwing ideas at the internet and seeing if they stick. It also helps me get all my ducks in a row so in the future I can refine these ideas into worthwhile mods. We're going to start with ammo and item changes. First things first, ammo is restricted similar to the aptly named limited ammo mod, giving a unit a single mag of ammo, but you can produce more mags that you can equip to your soldiers. To balance this out, every soldier will be getting an additional utility slot for any item, such as melee weapons, sidearms, more magazines, grenades, etc. This also means that you can get into battles where you'd run out of ammo, or you'd have to run because you're going to run out of ammo. Eventually you can produce mag holders that grant you more magazines, but they have increased weight, which thus reduces your mobility. Another idea taken from the limited ammo mod is the ability to pick up ammo from downed units, but it'll just be basic ammo, and it'll only drop a percentage of the time instead of all the time. Another thing is that all items need to be built one at a time, meaning grenades need to be built one at a time, and once they're used up. Same thing for ammo, armor, weapons, one of them for each of your soldiers, with the exception of TLP ballistic weapons, which you'll get for free, along with their ammo. This makes retrieving corpses that much more important, as weapons and utility items might be expensive resource-wise. We then have the weapon tiers and types. This also feeds into the reverse engineering section as well. We plan on having 4 tiers of weapons, starting at the TLP ballistic, moving on to the ballistic, EU ballistic, and Advent ballistic. This will be the first tier of weapons, with each having different costs for weapons and ammo. Ballistic TLP will have 0 costs, of course, so you don't have the issue where you can't afford ammo or weapons for your troops, but each level above that, the cost increases. For ballistic Advent, or any other Advent weapons for that matter, you need to pick up that weapon and that weapon's ammo to use it, or once you've collected enough materials, reverse engineer it so that you can produce it on your own. Of course, its ammo would also be the most expensive of the ballistic tier. Next we move on to the mag tier of weapons, which we will start at, of course, TLP laser weapons, moving on to mag weapons, standard laser weapons, and then Advent mag weapons. In this case, the weapons start to take on their own characteristics. Mag weapons have a decent amount of armor penetration, where they can ignore a certain amount of armor a unit has, while on the flip side, standard laser weapons deal more damage and have unlimited ammo, but when going against armor, they deal far less damage. TLP laser weapons are a mixed batch. They still require ammo, but each magazine gives a large amount of shots. They don't deal as much damage as laser weapons, but they also don't have armor piercing. Best to say they're a middle-of-the-road choice. And of course, Advent weapons are a better version of mag weapons with slightly better damage and armor penetration. Lastly, we have the tier 3 weapons, with TLP plasma weapons of course being the starting point. They are the cheapest and weakest of the tier 3 weapons. Next, 3 choices. The first, which requires mag tech and TLP plasma tech, which is coil weapons. They deal decent damage and ignore all enemy armor. Then we have plasma tech, or heavy plasma, which requires laser tech and TLP plasma tech. It deals massive damage but has low ammo count per magazine, making it very powerful but expensive. And the third option we have is EU plasma, which is the middle of the road choice. Still powerful but with a larger mag, but without any sort of armor penetration that the coil weapons give, but still deals more damage than coil weapons. Lastly, we have Merck Weapons, which are the 4th and final tier of weapons, requiring the previous 3 weapon techs. It mixes very good armor penetration with very good damage and an okay mag size. Another thing to tack on, since laser weapons have unlimited ammo, they can't have specialized ammo, and instead need certain weapon upgrades to give them their effects. Some weapon techs will also incur mobility penalty, and or increased cost to balance them out. The next change is ammo types. Instead of being an upgrade that you add to a soldier utility slot, it will become a magazine type, which means you'll have to produce that specific ammo, and then equip it to the soldier. That being said, to balance that out, ammo can be researched if you have the specific alien or alien artifacts instead of it just being at random, and then you can produce it afterward with just normal supplies. But ammo types work based on reloads now, so let's say you reload a poison mag. It removes any abilities for the previous ammo, then applies the new poison ability to your shooting, and then removes the poison mag from the soldier's inventory. Next is item weights. Some items will now impose mobility penalties, such as certain weapons or items, grenade launchers, rocket launchers, grenades, etc., which will balance them out, especially given the new utility slots they're given. Also, when certain items are used, they are removed from the soldier's inventory, thus removing its mobility penalty. Lastly is how you obtain new items, and that is via reverse engineering. Enemies will drop a certain weapons, ammos, and other items that you can use in the next mission, or you can save them until you have 10 of them and use them in the reverse engineering research, so that you can start producing them yourself. In the future, I want to look into an armor system with separate head, torso, and leg pieces that give unique effects, weights, and armors, but that'll have to wait for a different time. The next module is factions. In this one, we take the original factions, Templars, Reapers, and Skirmishers, and turn them into actual factions, and not a few additional super soldiers that we get in the game. Each faction will be split into further 3 sub-factions that encompasses 3 aspects of their combat utility. First off is Reapers, who will be separated into Saboteurs, which will use explosives, claymores, and stealth as their main ways of attack, forcing the player to play a sort of hide-and-seek game to find them. Next is the Assassins, who use close-range attacks and sort of hit-and-run strategies. And lastly, the main Reapers, who will use long-range attacks against your units. Splitting them up like this allows more unique enemy types and enemy encounters. The Reapers will also have a very unique look due to them not liking alien tech, and will use mostly conventional weapons or EU XCOM weapons, and usually be wearing light clothing and armor, as they are not prone to head-on combat. The next faction is the Templars, which are separated into Psionic, which are the equivalent of your own side troopers, great psionic powers with a decent mix of range and utility. Next is the Medicant, psionic buffing, healing, and debuffing soldiers, who work mostly in utility abilities to make your life harder, so other enemies can finish you off. And lastly is the normal melee Templars with their powerful psionic abilities and the strategy of rushing headlong into your units to say hello before stabbing them and pushing them off an edge. Their cosmetics will consist of clean clothing, high-tech armor, holding somewhere in the range of medium to heavy armor. The last faction, Skirmishers, start off with the Lancers, who will be fast melee enemies that use various buffs to close the distance and apply debuffs on their melee attacks. Then we have the Heavies, which will have heavy armor and use miniguns, grenade and rocket launchers, as well as flamers and other heavy weapons. Lastly, we have standard Skirmishers, which will use the ripjacks to gain position advantage or to close the distance and melee your weakest units. Their cosmetics will range from light to heavy armor, with a lot of standard advent armor and high-tech look, and they have the most versatile of their units. Now each faction will have a bunch of unique items to incentivize fighting or befriending them. For example, each primary weapon, Charred Gauntlet, Ripjack, and Vector Rifle, will be obvious ones that you can obtain, but we'll also have more interesting ones like specialized cloaking items, dirty bombs, assassin's blades, micro rocket launchers, resurrection pods, and many more, each having its own tier before it appears, and giving more rarity to each item. Of course, certain enemies will also have these items on them, which will allow you to find and eventually reverse engineer them. Each faction will have a scale between 100 to negative 100, with you starting at 0. The more missions you do for them, you gain positive rep, which will increase your standing. Eventually, at certain reps, they will reward you with the schematics of certain items, starting from the lowest to the highest. It also increases the chances that they could appear on your missions as a positive sit rep. But, on the flip side, killing them in missions or doing missions against them by other factions negatively affects your rep, and the worse it goes, the more likely they are to appear in your missions with the intent to kill you. Now I know in-game, the Reapers and Skirmishers kind of just make up and join each other, but that never seemed to make sense to me, considering how much the Reapers hate Advent and the aliens, and the Skirmishers are their creations. As for the Templars, they believe psionic power is power best used by humans, and also seem to look down on the other factions. Reapers would see psionics as something that came from the aliens and probably would reject them too. All in all, they might not be in a full-on war, but they definitely wouldn't be friends. Overall, the balance changes for items are meant to mix things up and add a bit of dread into missions without overwhelming you with large amounts of units, or super powerful units, or instant kills, but to make it more of a war of attrition, where equipment selection affects mobility, ammo amount, etc., and everything has its costs. Costs which you have to replenish, which means supplies are going to be a lot more scarce. And I think that increases difficulty and immersion in a good way. Of course, that will all be configurable to suit anyone and everyone's needs. The faction system would add tons to immersion as well, and add more layers to gameplay. Instead of it making you versus Advent, it's now you versus Advent and these 3 factions. Of course, over time you could eventually get them all on your side, or you could destroy them and reap their equipment to help you bring down Advent. I plan on having it where once your rep reaches critical mass, you'll have a chain of missions in which at the end you can destroy the HQ of that faction and kill its 3 leaders. Once that's done, all their sit reps, or should I say most of their sit reps, will be disabled from that faction, with only a few scattered remains that may appear in missions to exact revenge. And since the factions are mostly in a cold war against each other, destroying one faction will give you positive rep with the other factions, making it easier to reach 100 with them. Overall, I think this mod would make XCOM 2 excellent, especially with the future add-ons which are bound to be made after the system's created. I know we already have Raider factions, but all they really do is add a few sit reps and a few units that you fight, as well as fighting admin. They aren't really factions, they don't add anything but cement. Now, I know what you're all thinking, most of this can already be done with mods that are already in game, and you're right. The weight system, building one of an item, reverse engineering, weapon tiers are all possible thanks to various mods. But the faction system and the ammo system still need their own separate mods, and the ammo system is the easier of the 2 choices. The faction system won't necessarily be hard to make, but it'll be far more time consuming. Weapons and items can be made fairly fast. Unique effects of those weapons might take a little bit more time, but the real time eater would be making the units themselves. Let's say each sub-faction has 3 tiers of units, and each tier has 5 units. Each sub-faction would have 15 units plus their leader, which means that each faction would have a total of 48 units. That's a total of 144 units that you have to rig, equip, edit the AI to work, and with the way some of the AI would work with most of Reaper factions, hit and run tactics, and skirmishers getting ground advantage and prioritizing weaker units, they wouldn't be the easiest AIs to make. But that's just one of the few hurdles to work over with this mod. If you have any questions, just comment below. I've been working on the version of this without the faction system for now, so that when the time comes, we'll have everything ready. Thank you all for watching. This has been Nickredace, and I'll see you all in the next video. Nickredace out.